me, my name is Chris Scrivens, and I am the 23rd pastor of the Community Presbyterian Church of Chester. And it's a pleasure to be here with Cliff Acklem, who is the... Do you where you are in the line of succession?
I'm the latest pastor of United Presbyterian Church Flanders. Yeah.
What he said was he is the latest. But it is, Cliff's been here for a number of months and been part of Presbyterian clergy group, and it's been a delight to get to know each other and hang out a little bit together. And, you know, especially since it's nice when, what does the scripture say? It's lovely when God's people work together. Pastors are terrible at that, at working with other pastors. And I'm grateful that Cliff has been responsive and communicative and just very friendly as a neighbor, but not just as a neighbor geographically, but a neighbor according to our historical heritage as a church, which is fascinating. We did this first time last year as a newcomer to Chester 16 years ago yesterday. I really wanted to learn a lot about the church history, and we've been blessed having a number of church histories written over the years, but the last one ends in 1972. And there are copies of this on top of Reverend Williamson's tombstone, and we'll talk about that later if anybody wants to take them with them. But I think it's really neat to think that in 1752, people from the area united on this spot. The land was given, and before I go on, anybody that studies history understands the nature of history can be a little wibbly and wobbly. So some of the things that you read here on this bronze plaque slightly conflict with some of the things that are written down in the histories well before this bronze plaque was made. One of my favorite ones is the spelling of Larison. We all know the last name Larison from our area. There are at least 3 different spellings of Larison within a stone's throw of here. And every time I use it differently, someone else calls me out on, that's not how you spell it. I'm like, well, we don't really know. So some of the dates and things like that are a little bit different. I'm certainly no expert in the history of this area, this town. So I know some people are here from the Chester Historical Society, and also people who have been around for a while. If you have anything to add or any correction, please jump in. I have zero ego with regards to this. So please jump in and correct and add color. But it was around 1752 that the original church building was built here, and it was lovingly referred to as God's barn because it was apparently framed and clapboarded, but with no siding, no lath and plaster. It was a kind of a loose, wreathy, airy building. And for I don't want to say some strange reason, but it faced this way. Now, on the other side of this stone wall was a road that goes from Pleasant Hill Road all the way up to 206. And I talked with one of the gentlemen who's a caretaker here, and he said, yeah, they've taken their gator, their little 4x4 thing, all the way out through the woods, and it went. So it perhaps faced that part of the road, which is kind of interesting. Let's see, I have some notes to just kind of go through here. In 1714, it was written in one of the histories, these rugged settlers had strong religious convictions and were willing to travel miles in order to worship with other people, which just speaks to the idea of church in and of itself and community, and the idea of gathering together and having a place, even if it's a very basic place, to meet. The original building was 22 by 27 feet. Not that big. The sermons, we're going to get together on this, lasted from 60 to 90 minutes for just the sermon. Yes. Just the sermon. One of the pastor's final sermons, 3 hours. Whoa. They had a lot of grievances to air before they left. Another very favorite thing, and I'm looking at Andrew and Alex over there, in 1790, enough complaints about rambunctious boys in the sanctuary arose that a committee appointed someone to keep order in the gallery, probably with some sort of a stick. Our first pastor, the Reverend Samuel Harker, came to Chester October 31st, 1752. Graduated from Princeton College, He was apparently, quote, remarkable for personal size and strength, and he also claimed to be experienced in all practical business and able to go out into the field and cradle more wheat in a day than any other man in this part of the country. So it's kind of, who's the apple, not Johnny Appleseed.
Paul Bunyan.
The lumberjack guy.
Paul Bunyan.
Paul Bunyan-esque. And I love this. This is a personal thing. Being a larger stature, not knowing how to cradle wheat. But he apparently preached in knee breeches, which were fashionable at the time, and was notable for his excellent preaching. And I always tell people when I interviewed for Chester, I made sure I wore shorts and flip-flops every single time so that they knew what they were getting.
So can you define a knee breeches?
I think they were probably
Knee breeches.
knee breeches, and then you'd have stockings.
I got it. Yeah, I got to
In
fix my
fact,
hearing aids.
the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, to traditional outfit, includes knee breeches and a frilly shirt and stuff like that.
Yeah, I go back pretty far, but that was before my
Those before your time. One of the things that I tell people I love about our church, and I love being able to say that to people that I'm not used to seeing every Sunday, because this is our church that we're talking about. Samuel Harker, the first pastor of this church, was removed for being a heretic. Nobody else is excited about that? I love that. He apparently got very Baptist. So it was technically heresy, but he kind of became a little bit out of the bounds of Presbyterian theology. He was removed by the presbytery, found further work a few years later as a chaplain for George Washington's Continental Army in 1763. Despite being more Baptist than Presbyterian, his son became a Church of England minister, and the two of them traveling from the United States back to England by ship, which is the way you travel at that time. Sadly, the ship went down in a storm and they both died. They both perished. So that's where our church began, with a little bit of heresy. And I think, where'd Cliff go? Oh. I think all pastors yearn to be labeled a little bit of a heretic here and there.
Heresy that's a Greek word for thinking differently.
Is it?
Yeah. Is it Greek?
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It just means to think differently.
To think differently. So yeah.
It might not be wrong. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't like preaching the devil. You know, he came here on October 31st. But he became Baptist. So in 1825, and this is counter to what this says, more or less, the building, the congregation had become successful enough and big enough that the building was rebuilt this way. So if you come here in the winter time, just after a little bit of snow has fallen, and you have a tiny bit of imagination, a wee bit of imagination, I don't think it's imagination. I think it's true. You can see a depression in the ground, and if, to my eyes, you follow the depression, I put these flags out. This is about 22 by 27 feet. The stone at the far end of Reverend Williamson, who was a very instrumental pastor in the early to mid 19th century, 1800s, the one who was pastor when the church moved to Chester, and much, much beloved. That is his stone, and the legend is that the stone marks roughly where the pulpit was that he preached from. Now again, going back to like church discipline, when the church was moved, it was made a proper building. It had, siding and lath and plaster on the inside. It was sealed up. It was tighter. It had a stove to provide heat, and it had two entrances, presumably a male and female entrance facing the road. And initially, the pulpit was here. The pastor facing the congregation facing the front door, and also facing the two doors into which people would arrive if they were a little bit late. So, yes, the older church was not bashful about this kind of shaming, we'll call it, for lack of a better term. So in 1832, there was apparently a bit of a church revival. And a lot of people start, and who knows how these start. If we knew, we would start them, right?
Oh yeah.
and I think this was under Reverend Williamson. Thank you. I can't confuse Williamson and Woodhull. Reverend Woodhull, William Woodhull, the Woodhull plot is over here, and Reverend Woodhull's stone is marked by that fluorescent flag. If anybody has read the book called The Culper Ring, Washington Spies, or seen the Netflix series Turn about Washington spies, Abraham Woodhull, the main character in this movie that started spying on the British and reporting to Washington, and it became this whole big thing, was the cousin to William Woodhull, our pastor, who was known for speaking ardently against the crown from the pulpit. I was going to say of which I'm very proud. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good.
Yeah, well, that's the English.
That's right. That's right.
the
Yeah,
British.
yeah. Although they had Scottish in them. Yeah.
Well, we don't talk about them.
There were Scottish redcoats.
We're there.
Well, yeah. There was kind of like that's how you divide and conquer, you know.
Okay. So 1832, there was this big church revival. About 1835, 48 members were dismissed. It's not language you would use today. What? No, not ejected. No. The opposite. No, not thrown out. This was a joyous time because the church was getting big. Our towns were getting bigger. 1835, 48 members dismissed to form the Mount Olive Church. 1852, 26 went to Flanders. And at about the same time, about 50 or so left to Chester. And apparently, according to this, the building here was dismantled, which was, I think, a common practice in the day for dimensional lumber, nails, fasteners, things like that. Dismantled, taken to Chester. Sorry, Flanders. Apparently the Chester people got all the wood from the building and built the church in Chester. Now, I've been in every nook and cranny of that building looking for a board. This is what I would have done from the Old Hill Church, Pleasant Hill, 1852. I haven't found it yet.
It was on the wall of the pastor's office that got demolished.
Maybe, yeah, that must be it. Yeah, that must be it. There was apparently part of the removal to Chester was there were people in Chester that wanted a church in town, and they were of some means and donated the land and pledged to donate finances to join it. But one of the things that I thought was funny was, and this resonates with us modern church people, it was increasingly difficult to induce the young people to travel the long distance across the Black River to Pleasant Hill. So from where we, Chester people came. And yeah, one of the, who is it? Well, the names Cooper and Budd are very big in our history, and General Cooper is buried right over there in the Cooper Mill. And there were a lot of prominent citizens in the borough of Chester, in the village of Chester, that wanted the church to come in. And there was strong connection and strong implication that if the church should be moved, they would give liberally to the erection of a new building. Yet there was strong opposition to change, unlike we have in churches now. We want to change things. So Reverend Williamson was the one who made the changes. That was that transitional pastor. Now, this is where I'm talking mostly about Chester, so forgive me.
Carry on.
In 1859, the property for the parsonage was built, and the lot was bought, all of the property was bought for $247.50, which in modern currency is $9,500, so still really, really cheap. Now here's a question for the historical people. There was no parsonage in the village at this point, and Reverend Mr. Williamson living in the house now occupied by Mr. Augustus Drake. Is the Drake house still around?
That's the Weichert building.
The what?
That's the Weichert building.
The Weichert building. Oh, so right next to.
Very close.
Right next, very close to us. Yes.
Well, there were. Let me stand. There were lots of Drakes. That was one of the Drake houses.
Okay. Well, 1761, the President Parsonage was built at a cost of $2,000. It was regarded as, I mean, it's like 4,000 square feet. It was regarded, and still is, like a pretty significant house, but $77,000 today. Trees were planted. Oh, here's a general history. 1867, iron ore was discovered in Chester, which had been a quiet rural village noted chiefly for its farms, and it became a center of the mining industry, but after 30 years, the mining industry ceased. And I love this line. The place became once more the quiet center of a rural population whose chief attraction to the outside world will in the future probably lie in the beauty and scenery and its pure bracing air, leading people from the cities to build their summer homes upon our hills.
Appropriate.
I love that one. I think that was from the 1911 history. Here's another thing that I think, it brings me comfort, and it just speaks to the struggle of church life and of pastors throughout the history. The church has never been strong numerically. Mr. Brewster records that when he came, there were about 50 members. It has always needed struggle and sacrifice and faith to maintain it. It needs struggle and sacrifice and faith to maintain it now. Yet that very fact has made the church the dearer to its members and called forth their chivalrous devotion. Hear, hear. Many dedicated saints of our current congregations stand with us now. So that's just a small bit of the early history of the Old Hill Church that became Flanders, Mount Olive, and Chester. In the middle of last century, Mount Olive and Flanders united, and it's now United Presbyterian Flanders.
With donated land, we got it for free.
With donated land, perfect. Now,
Nan Drake.
From Drake.
From Nan Drake. And here was the deal, the Bud Lake Church burned.
the Bud Lake Church.
They were outgrowing the Flanders Church, the little brown church, also fun place. So anyway, they tried to find a place that was in between. And Nan Drake came forward and gave 5 acres. And like I was explaining to everybody, there's Bud Lake side and then there's Flanders side. So you got to divide the town. So you're either on Bud Lake or
Right.
you're on Flanders.
Right.
So they came up with Drakesdale, was almost like the top of the hill. And she gave the 5 acres.
1982, then they broke ground.
So
Wow.
we have 2 pulpits. One is the original lectern from the Bud Lake Church.
Yes.
And the other one is from Flanders. So the one we read the scripture from,
Yep.
and the other we do the sermons from. And that's where the United Church.
That's fantastic.
But we came from you. So
We all came from one place. You know, we didn't come from Chester. We came from here. We came from this spot. You're standing in what is more or less the doorway. I don't know if that's the men's or the women's side. Cliff, let's come up and stand by the pulpit. You have paper here. This is the one of Reverend Williamson and his family. So yeah, this is where the pulpit would have been. Come into the sanctuary, folks.
I want to be by the heater.
And think about 100 people being in here in the heyday. And in the early days, they would have brought like a hot brick or a little sheet metal coal
Yes.
stove to put at their feet. And this is where we worship. Now this is the old section of the cemetery. Some of the stones, it depends upon where the sun is throughout the day. Some of them are very legible in certain light, some of them are not. The oldest stone is, if you do an about face, there's a little flag, that kind of brownish reddish stone is the oldest stone. That's from the early 1700s, I believe. Reverend Woodhull's is with his wife. The other flag over there, that's the Woodhull section. But we'll take it here and we'll meet in the chapel, which was built, I think, 1910 or 1911. So it has no affiliation with anything other than the cemetery. And we have hot apple cider and donuts and more conversation. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I never wanted